This map shows the number of students attending UMaine Fort Kent from each of the zip codes in the northeastern United States. It's showing these by categories or buckets. So the little dots are 1 student, the triangles are 2 to 5, then 6 to 10, 11 to 30, 31 to 125 students. And I'm using a trick here to increase the visual separation between these middle categories, where the default would be to just go with progressively larger circles. But that might make it hard to separate between a clustering of towns that have 6 or 10 or 11 to 30. When you're using different shapes as well, you're able to increase the visual separation and see which one has which. And if you're curious about any one of those particular towns, I've included a snapshot of the attribute table here. So you're seeing Fort Kent has 125, Madawaska 43, Holton 24, Caribou 21, and so on. So this is data that comes from you. It's when you put in where you want your mail to go. And that can be a flawed data set if you want to send your mail to one place you actually grew up or live in another. So there's flaws in this data set, but it's still the best that we have to understand where our students are coming from. And the way I've broken this down is I have sort of northern Aroostook County from Holton north has 316 students. This central or very southern Aroostook, Piscataquis, Penobscot County, and down east Washington County has 47 in total. This sort of broad downstate area, and I apologize to whoever is here from Greenville and just got offended by being called downstate, has 249. And then out of state but within the Northeast, within the focus of this map, has 49. We have students from California as a hotspot, Jamaica and the other Caribbean nations have a lot of students coming up here. They're not included in this analysis, they are in others. But for us right now, we want to work with the Northeast because it's an easy data set to work with, especially when you're working with zip codes. So let's see, this is by me from a query from Main Street, and it excludes anybody who's in an online program, a distance program, or a high school student who is taking a class with us. So these are people who are on campus with us seeking a degree. So let's see what that looks like in ArcMap. Here is my finished product, what I just exported from, and I'm going to walk you through all of the steps to create this map. You are then going to take your own interpretation of this, maybe separate these data out a little differently, maybe look at just southern Maine, draw these lines in a way that seems appropriate to you, especially if you're that guy from Greenville. So let's get that out of the way, and our first step is going to be some processing in Excel. So let's go to the Student Materials Drive, Datasets for Student Use, GIS Applications 1, Lab number 3, and Fall 2019 Self-Reported Hometowns. You're going to want to do a file save right now, enable saving, and before you do anything else, you're going to want to save this to some place that you have write access to, because you only have read access to our shared drive, because if you had the ability to save this, it would overwrite everything, and there goes my whole lab. So once you've done that and you have your own version of this, you can see we have Caribou, Maine, USA 04736-1846. And we need to have all of these zip codes narrowed down to just 5-digit zip. So the first step is a processing step where you split these data using that little dash as the divider. So highlight column D by clicking on D right here, and then go to Data, Text to Columns. And it's going to ask you, do you want to use delimited or fixed width? And because we have a delimiter, that dash always separates the 5-digit from the 4. We're going to use that as the separator. So we're going to hit Next, and then check the box that says Other. You can uncheck Tab because we're not doing that. So Other, and just type in the dash, which is just the minus sign to the left of the equal sign on your keyboard. And you see how that's knocked that over from, if you uncheck that, you see that's how it is right now. Check that in, now it makes 2 columns of data. And I've put this postal code all the way on the right, because if you had something here, this operation would overwrite that. So Next. And you have to say this column data format is text. Otherwise that 0 is going to go away because it thinks it's a number, and a number doesn't need the 0 in front of it. But when it's text, that is the digits 0, 4, 7, 4, 5. The other you can leave as it is because we're just going to delete that anyway. So now you can say finish. Now you can select column E, right click, delete that. Now we have one last step to take before we can input this into a pivot table and generate a count of the number of students by zip code. And that is to add a feature ID or a student ID to every one of these. We can't use your actual student IDs for obvious reasons, but if we right click on A, we can say insert, and that inserts a new column. So just right click, insert, and that is going to be FID, feature ID. We're just going to do 1, 2, and once we've entered 1, 2, we can click, hold, and select both of those. And if you double click on that green box, it'll go all the way down and fill out right to the bottom of the page what new student number you are. So 768 students in this data set. And we'll see how that becomes important in just a moment. So we're going to run this through a pivot table, and that's going to consolidate all these into categories, saying for every one of these postcodes, how many individual students do we have? And you'll be familiar with pivot tables if you've taken the GIS class, but I'm going to assume you haven't and go through this step by step. So click on this little triangle at the top left, Insert, Pivot Table. And you can accept all these defaults, and that creates a new worksheet that has a pivot table. And now you can click, hold, drag, release on postal, which is the postal codes. And that gives you all of the postal codes. Then take the FID and again click, hold, drag, and release in values. And that gives the count of the feature IDs. So if there's 2 students from zip code 03102, that'll pop out 2. If you have 04062, that's somewhere in Maine, the 040s, 7 students from that zip code. 04401 has 15. So now we need to select all of this. So click, hold, drag, release. Control C to copy, and create a new sheet. Control V to paste. We're going to rename this sheet 4 as join field or join table. So rename join table. Now the last thing that you need to do before you move on is take this, and where it says row labels, call that zip. And count of FID, count. And that is going to make it easier for the computer to read because it doesn't like to have spaces. So now you can save and close. Now let's open up ArcMap. And now we have a blank iteration of ArcMap. First thing we're going to do is add some data from ArcGIS Online. So right by this full plus we have a drop-down menu, Add Data from ArcGIS Online. And we're going to search for the data set, USA zip code points. And this first one here, not the second one with the blue dots, but these wider space dots is the one that we'll use. And all you have to do is hit Add. And that brings in the zip code locations for all of the United States. If we zoom in, we'll see the great and good state of Maine. If you open the attribute table, you'll see that it has the town name, state, type, close out of that. And now we need to bring in the Excel data sheet. So add data. And you are going to need to create a new folder connection to connect to whatever folder that you saved your Excel sheet to. So click on Connect to Folder. You'll go through this PC, or perhaps User in your case, but if you've got a thumb drive in this PC, find your thumb drive, connect to that location. For me, I have access to the Student Materials drive because I write all this, and data sets for student use. If I select GIS Applications 1, that gives me the ability to find GIS Applications 1 in this drop down here. So there's GIS Applications 1, lab number 3, double click on the Excel sheet, and this is why we named this join table. It makes it easy to find. Add. Open that up to take a look, and you'll see that we have the zip and the count by zip. So 04011 has 5 students. Close. Now what we need to do is take the data from here and join them to these point locations, because while we have the text value here that says this is zip 01536, this data set has no idea where that is. But this data set, every one of these points has a location on the ground, and it also has this field in common, zip code. So if we take the data from here for 04073, we can attach it using that field that it has in common, and that is called a tabular or table join. So we can close out of that, and the way this works is right click, joins and relates, join. And we only have one table loaded in, so it's defaulted to that. We have a drop down zip code, so that's taking from here which field we want to say is in common, and we have the field zip that will allow us to make that join. So keep all records or keep only matching records. So if we have all of these other point locations that we know don't have students based on this, if nothing from here joins to here, it can fall right out the other end because there's no students. So I'm actually going to have you select keep only matching records. So we have 286 zip codes that actually have students from them. We won't display the rest. Okay. So that is now showing us only these locations that have students coming from them. And if we right click, zoom to layer, we can see where all of our students come from. So there's the Northeast, there's California, Alaska, Hawaii, students coming to us from throughout the United States, and Jamaica and other Caribbean nations as well, and Canada, but because we don't have the same 5-letter zip codes for them, we don't see them. So back to the state of Maine. Now before we do anything farther with this, we want to export this data set somewhere where it can be saved for you so you don't lose it. So right click, data, export data. And then you can use the same folder that you just navigated to and name it student locations by zip.shp. Okay. And yes, we want to add that in. So now we can uncheck the old one, check on the new one, and this data set is showing for Maine and New England where all our students are from. Let's go back to list by drawing order, and we can actually remove this. So we can just right click, remove. We don't need that anymore. So this data set is in an unprojected coordinate system. It's in WGS 1984, so that's straight latitude, longitude, and that gives a warped perspective on the shape of all the features on this map, so we want to correct that before we go on. So double click on layers and go to the data frame properties coordinate system. See WGS 1984, that's also the native language of the GPS system. And we want to go, instead of geographic coordinate systems, projected coordinate systems. And we want to use a continental system for North America. And we are going to use, let's see, US National Atlas equal area. Okay. And that's showing things a little distorted for us. But if we zoom to this, we'll see that it's a shape that makes sense for the entire United States, or at least the lower 48. and we're focusing here. The next step for making this map is symbolizing each of these points by the number of students that came from that location. So if we double click on the layer, we can go to the tab Symbology and then Quantities, Graduated Symbols, with the value field Count, and then Classify. And this allows us to select where these ranges fall. And I used first 1, so we want to know which towns have just 1 student, and then 5, 10, 30, and then a maximum of 125. Okay, so now if we apply with the default, you see what a mess that makes. So if we change this template to something hollow, color, no color, now we can see better the overlapping values. But you see the problem with this. We have slightly different circles representing different categories. So that's why I use different shapes as well. So for towns that just have 1, I'm going to change that from hollow to black, and I'm going to change the size to 2. So we have just a little dot where every one of these towns that has 2 students is from. And then I'm going to change this to triangle 2, color, no color, size 10. And then square 2, color, no color, size 12. And then pentagon 2, color, no color, size 16. And then we're going to keep the last one as a circle, but we're going to edit that so that the outline size is 0.4. Okay, okay, okay. So now we can see every one of these. If we want information for any one of these particular locations, we can use the Identify tool, click on it. Nope, I missed. There you go. So there's Bangor, zip code area, and then right next to it is Brewer, and that has a count of 6 students where Bangor sent 15. So now we are ready to bounce over into the layout view. And we don't want these margins right now, so we can double click on layers, go to size and position, 0, 0, 8.5, 11. Okay. And now we can use the magnifying glass to click, hold, drag, release the box around where we want the map to be. Do that again to really narrow it in. And now we have a situation where we could bring in other data sets that include boundaries, towns, all sorts of other information. But these data sets can also be accessed as a base map that comes in all pre-prepared, ready to go. So we're going to use the drop-down by Add Data to add base map. And we're going to select light gray canvas. And that will give us just the outlines of the states and some of the major towns. As you zoom in farther, it will give you more information. If you zoom out, it will give you less. It's what you call an adaptive layer. And this comes in pretty dark. I don't want the background to be as dominant to the viewer as it is right now by default. So what I'm going to do when this loads up and appears in my table of contents is change the transparency to 50% so it sort of fades into the background. And this is the reason I didn't bring this background layer in to begin with. It takes a long time to load, especially the first time, but when you move it around, sometimes it just gets to be a little bit sad. You just have to wait. Alright, so double click on Base Map and display transparency 50%. And you'll see how that causes it to fade into the background, allowing the real data to show through. Now, we need to add a title, a legend, and a little screenshot of the attribute table. So let's first do the attribute table, and if you right-click, open attribute table, you can see that we have much more information than we want to actually show right now. So if we right-click and go to Properties, Fields, uncheck everything, this little hollow box here, turn all fields off, and then we can say check back on Count and PO Name, which is the town. Okay. Now if you right-click where it says PO Name, it'll allow you to change how that displays by going to the Properties. So right-click, Properties, and Alias Town Name. Okay. Right-click on Count, Properties, Students. And you have to open that up just a little bit. And this is pretty small. If you want it to be bigger, and I do, if you hold down the Control key and use the scroll wheel, it will make that text bigger. Now this is not showing anything in any order, but if you double click where it says Students, we'll sort first from smallest to largest. If you double click again, it'll go from largest to smallest. So now we have Fort Kent, Madawaska, and so on, down to St. Francis with 5. Now if you use the snipping tool, and if you don't have that, you can go Start, type in Snip, and it will appear, and say New, and then carefully click, hold, drag, release, down to St. Francis, and you can just move that off to the side, close the attribute table. You can just Control V, and that will paste right in. Then you can move that around just with any other element and plop that up in the top corner. So now the reader of the map has the information for every one of these towns that contributes 5 or more students. Now, as before, you're going to insert a title. I'm going to go size 28, insert text, and that's Fall 2019, 2010 term. Move that around a little bit, put it in a good location, and then self-reported hometowns on-campus UMFK students. And I want that to be justified to the center. Okay. There is our title. And I think I want to zoom in a little bit more so we have just from New York to Maine, going all the way down to Jersey and Maryland, and we only have 1 or 2 or 3 students from down there. So in order to get a better view of really the Northeast, I'm going to zoom in just a little bit more. So from just south of Long Island to northern Maine. And that gives us a better view of things. You can see as I zoomed in, it gave me more town names and more fine detail on some of these lakes. So now we are going to insert some more text, and that will be size 12, somewhere right here over the Atlantic Ocean. And that went back to size 28, but we can fix that later. Prepared by, move that, double click on it, change the symbol to size 12. Okay. Prepared by your name, not mine. On today's date, query UMFK underscore student underscore XTR, new line, students enrolled by term, close quotes, excludes, online, distance, new line, and high school students, period. And that gives the reader information about who made the map, how it was made. Oh, and I see how that happens. So we want to change that back to 28. Our fickle friend there. So that can go there. There's your title. There's your extra information. This, if somebody from the school was reading this, they would be able to see, oh, this query comes out of Main Street. That's the title of it. I can look at these data. I can check it myself. If I want to make another map for fall 2011, that's easily done by changing the term. Next, we want to insert a legend. Insert legend as before. We don't want the base map or the information that goes with it. We just want the student locations by zip. Next, 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 finish. And there's our ugly legend. We can make it pretty by saying, let's see, let's first go into here and fix all these extra zeros here. Go to symbology, label 1, and then just enter down 2 to 5. So there's no such thing as 1.000001 students. We don't cut you in half, hopefully. And 2 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 30, 31 to 125. So that looks a lot better. You can change that to blank, blank. Now we just have the legend, and that is by zip code there. Now that's not clear what 1 is, so let's go and change that to 1 student. Change that to 2 to 5 students, 6 to 10. Doing this 2 different ways to show you can do changes to the labels several ways. Students. You could also go back to the symbology tab and the layer properties, do this the same way. And if we want that a little bit bigger, we can drag that out. So by zip code, the little dot is 1 student, the triangle is 2 to 5, square is 6 to 10, and so on. Now, we have that. We can save it as demo.mxd, and that is pretty well ready to export as a map without any further interpretation. So File, Export Map. I'm going to call that demo.pdf, 200 dots per inch, save as type PDF, save. That's going to load up, demo.pdf. And there is the first version of that map, essentially what you saw at the beginning of this video. Close that. And now the interesting thing to do with these data sets is to look at them based on general locations. So if we split this up into 4, you've already seen what the results of that are, but let's try splitting this up into just really northern St. John Valley versus southern Aroostook. So we can just use our drawing tool to draw a line where we intend to make this separation. So click once to start, click twice to stop. Let's do another one and just make that from there to there. Now what we're going to do is, here where it says select features, use the drop down and select by lasso. And if you click and hold, you can then drag around all of those things that you want to include in the count. And that will have selected every one of those points in the St. John Valley. Now right click and open the attribute table. You see those ones are selected. And if you right click on students and say statistics, you'll see we have a sum of 232 students from those selected layers. So I'm going to write that down on my paper. 232. Now I can close that and the attribute table. And now I can do the same thing, select Southern Aroostook and little bits of other counties there too. And now I have just those selected. Go back to that attribute table. Do the same thing, right click on Students, Statistics, 94. I'm going to write that down as 94. You can do the same thing with other lines down here, however you choose to split that up. I want you to split it up in your own way, look at the data set in a way that makes sense to you, in a way that you're curious about, and you can draw a line instead of double clicking, just single clicking if you want to see that part, however the case may be. But then you can insert the text there. So we had 232 from the valley, and we had 94 from Southern Aroostook. And you can double click on that, change the width. I had mine set to 2 because that really makes the point. That's a separate area. And then File, Export Map. I'm going to call that Demo 2. That will load out. Here is Demo 2. 232 students from the valley, 94 from points south. And I would expect you to analyze everything on this map in some way. However you choose to split that up, you could do it as points south of Aroostook. You could do a line anywhere you want. But I want you to look at this data set in some way that makes sense to you, that's interesting, and submit just one map that is essentially like this, but with your own lines drawn and your own totals.